Deep inside the storage rooms of the British Museum, hidden among thousands of ancient clay tablets from Mesopotamia, sits a forgotten artifact known only by a catalog number, K7752. It rests inside the Kayunja collection, a massive archive recovered during the 1850s excavations of the ruined city of Nineveh, once the capital of the Assyrian Empire. The tablet was uncovered during Hormuzd Rassam's expedition alongside the legendary library of King Ashurbanipal, a ruler obsessed with preserving every piece of knowledge his empire could collect. Most visitors to the museum never hear about K7752. It is small, roughly the size of a paperback book, and scholars classify it as a literary supplement, an auxiliary text connected to one of the oldest surviving stories in human history, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The epic itself is famous. Multiple versions survive, but the most complete was discovered in Nineveh. It tells the story of Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, who becomes obsessed with defeating death after losing his companion Enkidu. His search leads him across the edge of the world to meet Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Flood, a man granted immortality by the gods themselves. But Utnapishtim cannot give immortality to Gilgamesh. Instead, he reveals the existence of something else, a plant, a mysterious organism hidden at the bottom of the cosmic freshwater abyss called the Apsu. Not a plant that grants eternal life, but one capable of restoring youth. Gilgamesh dives into the abyss, retrieves the plant, and plans to carry it back to Uruk to test it on an old man. But on the journey home, while stopping to bathe in a pool, a serpent emerges, steals the plant, consumes it, and sheds its skin before disappearing. Gilgamesh is left devastated. That is the canonical story known from standard translations. But K7752 adds a detail the famous versions leave out. It names the plant, and that changes everything. The standard Babylonian text refers to the plant using a descriptive phrase often translated as the plant of heartbeat or the plant of becoming young again. The wording describes what the plant does, not what it actually is. For generations, Assyriologists assumed the plant was symbolic, a literary device representing humanity's failed search for immortality. But K7752 is different. The tablet identifies itself as a commentary on Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood narrative. According to the scribe, he is preserving an older Sumerian tradition passed down from the wise men of Eridu before languages changed over time. And then he gives the name, GIBIL SUBBA. Translated literally, it means the plant that throws off the burning, or the plant that casts out the fire. The wording is strange. The phrase does not appear in any other surviving cuneiform text. The scribe explains that the burning refers to the burning of age itself, the heat and decay that consume the body over time. And this is where the story becomes difficult to ignore. Modern biology now recognizes chronic inflammation as one of the central mechanisms behind aging. Scientists even use a term for it, inflammaging. Low-level inflammation slowly damages the body over decades and contributes to many diseases associated with aging. K7752 describes the exact same process nearly 4,000 years ago. The tablet goes even further. It gives the plant's habitat. According to the scribe, the organism grew only in places where sweet water emerges from the bitter sea. This is not fantasy. Submarine freshwater springs actually exist in the Persian Gulf, where fresh water rises through saltwater environments. Ancient Mesopotamian texts frequently associated these regions with Dilmun, the legendary paradise land connected to early Sumerian tradition. The scribe insists the plant could survive nowhere else. Freshwater merging into saltwater was essential. He even records that, by his own time, around 1700 BCE, the plant had already become rare. According to the tablet, many of its habitats have been destroyed or overharvested. 3 locations were still believed to contain surviving specimens. 2 correspond closely to real regions along the Bahraini and eastern Saudi coastline. The third remains unidentified. For over 170 years, K7752 has remained buried inside museum archives under a simple classification. Gilgamesh Commentary, botanical/theological supplement. Most scholars treated the tablet as literary imagination rather than evidence of a real organism. And for decades, there was little reason to challenge that interpretation. But modern science changed the conversation. Today, researchers have identified dozens of plants containing compounds linked to anti-aging effects. Resveratrol, found in grapes, became famous for activating proteins involved in cellular maintenance and longevity research. Astragalus contains compounds studied for their effects on telomeres. Rhodiola rosea has shown stress resistance and metabolic benefits. Centella asiatica influences collagen production and tissue repair. Berberine has been investigated for senolytic properties, selectively targeting aging cells. Fisetin, found in strawberries, has emerged as one of the most promising natural compounds being studied in aging research today. These are not ancient legends. These are peer-reviewed scientific studies. The effects are generally modest, but they are real. And with every decade, researchers continue discovering new plant-derived compounds that influence aging pathways inside the body, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if ancient civilizations really had identified unusual organisms with measurable biological effects? What if some of those species disappeared before modern science ever documented them? K7752 does not prove such a plant existed, but it does something remarkable. It describes a specific organism with a specific habitat connected to a biological process modern science only recently began to understand. And the Mesopotamian tradition is not alone. Ancient India preserved stories of Soma, a mysterious sacred plant associated with vitality and divine power. Ancient Persia described Halma with nearly identical properties. Chinese tradition revered lingzhi mushrooms as longevity organisms. Egyptian medical texts refer to plants linked to restored vitality and extended life. Different civilizations, different continents, but the same recurring idea, a hidden plant connected to youth and longevity. Most likely, these traditions exaggerated the effects of real medicinal organisms, but the repetition itself is difficult to dismiss entirely. Then comes another strange thread. In 1953, a British botanical researcher named Mary Hartley led an expedition across coastal regions of Bahrain and eastern Saudi Arabia. Her published reports described several uncatalogued species living in tidal marshes and freshwater seep environments. But according to archived references, Hartley's private field journals mentioned something unusual. A thorny succulent species recovered near a freshwater seep that displayed pharmacological properties of interest. The published report never identified the organism, and the pages discussing it were never fully digitized. Hartley later donated her botanical samples to a herbarium in southern England. When the institution merged with another archive decades later, the specimen disappeared from public records. No official explanation was provided. Maybe it was misplaced. Maybe it was simply recatalogued incorrectly. Or maybe it was never important at all. But the coincidence remains strange, because the environment Hartley explored matches the exact habitat described in K7752. Freshwater emerging into saltwater. An ecological niche so rare that many of its plant species remain poorly studied even today. Modern surveys of Persian Gulf seep ecosystems are surprisingly limited. Some locations have been destroyed by coastal development, dredging, pollution, and oil infrastructure. Others remain largely untouched. Marine biologists working in the region have already documented endemic species found nowhere else on Earth, which means unknown plant species may still exist there, possibly undiscovered, possibly unstudied. And if a rare organism with unusual biochemical properties ever evolved in these isolated environments, this would be exactly where it might survive. Of course, there is a far more cautious explanation. K7752 was probably a literary expansion written by a Babylonian scholar, adding imaginative detail to an already famous story. Ancient cultures routinely attributed magical properties to plants. Most of those claims collapse under scientific scrutiny. The anti-aging compounds identified today produce limited effects, nothing remotely close to the dramatic rejuvenation described in Gilgamesh. The missing Hartley material may be nothing more than incomplete archival preservation, and the restricted access to K7752 at the British Museum is most likely related to conservation concerns. That is the responsible interpretation. It may also be the correct one, but the convergence remains unsettling. A Sumerian text describing aging as an internal burning, a rare ecological habitat that truly exists. Modern science discovering real anti-aging compounds in plants. A forgotten expedition recovering unidentified species from the exact same environment. And a tablet ending with one final damaged line that scholars still debate. One translation reads, "And the plant remains where the sweet water meets the bitter sea." Another translates it as, "And the plant grows still in the place not yet disturbed." A third, far more controversial interpretation says, "And the plant waits where the bones of cities have not yet covered." The damaged cuneiform signs allow multiple readings, but all of them suggest the same thing. The plant was not believed to be extinct, only hidden, rare, almost lost, but not entirely gone. Somewhere along the Gulf coastline, according to the ancient scribe, it still survived. Whether that was true then, or remains true now, nobody knows, because no one has ever conducted a complete modern search for it. The tablet remains in London. The missing field notes remain missing. And across the Persian Gulf coastline, freshwater seeps still rise silently through the salt water exactly as they did thousands of years ago. If something unusual once grew there, it may still be waiting.